what we're doing. I'll call us to order for Wednesday, February 26, 2025, 2 p.m. Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership Executive Committee session. And we will start with a roll call. Who's handling that today?
I got that. Ned Galloway.
Present.
Keith Smith.
Present.
Emily Dreyfus.
Here.
Greg Poe in place of William Park.
Here.
Shayla Washington. Colette Sheehy.
Here.
Kim Highland.
Oh, Emily. I didn't realize LAJC was Emily. Hi, Emily. Sorry. Didn't say hello to you.
I'll switch my name.
And there's Kim. Great. And then Logan, if you will handle the notice of electronic meeting statement.
Sure. This meeting of the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership is being held pursuant to Code of Virginia subsection C of section 2.2-3708.3, which allows a public body to hold all virtual public meetings. The meeting is being held via electronic video and audio means through Zoom online meetings and is accessible to the public. The method for holding this meeting shall not change unless a new meeting notice is provided. Should the electronic transmission fail, you may reach out to the CVRHP at gthomas@tjpdc.org. Notice has been provided to the public through notice at the TJPDC offices, to the media, website postings, and agenda. The meeting is held pursuant to the remote electronic participation and all virtual meeting policy as adopted by the Commission on July 25th, 2024. The meeting minutes will reflect that the meeting was held by electronic communication means and the type of electronic communication means by which the meeting was held. A recording of the meeting will be posted at www.tjpdc.org within 10 days of the meeting.
Thank you, sir. And just per those new state guidelines, those of us that are critical for the quorum do need to keep our cameras on, or else we will be considered out of the meeting. Just as a friendly reminder, staff, you can come and go as needed for your camera if you need that. Very good. We'll move to public comment. Is there anyone here online that wishes to give public comment today? Right, seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. We have both the minutes of the October 23rd, 2024 Executive Committee meeting and then the financial update. Logan, were you prepared to make any comments about the financial update?
I think my only comment I really have is that the noteworthy number from the staff end, I think, is that there's only around $4,000 remaining for the fiscal year, which is not a whole lot of money or time. I think that equates to roughly, I don't know, about a week for Ruth and I to work on things combined. So that is a noteworthy item I would take for the projected expenses for FY25.
Thank you for that. Ruth, by the way, is a training. I don't know if that may have been mentioned when I was late logging in. But with that, are there any questions or any edits for the minutes or anything relative to the two items on consent? All right, hearing none, then we'll go ahead and approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll do that, sir.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Kim. The motion's been made and second. If everyone could unmute their mics. And then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. Thank you all. So this will take us to number 4, which is the bulk of the meeting today. We scheduled, roughly 40 minutes for it. If it lasts 10, that's great. If it lasts a little longer, then we'll just make sure we still finish the rest of the time undone. Kate and Pritchett and I met back in January over lunch and had a great conversation that built on the idea. I don't know if you all recall back at the December full partnership meeting, I was talking about getting with all of the members of the partnership to discuss how things are going, where they're going, what we should be doing or what we should be working on, etc. And Caden had some really good ideas and thoughts that day as well. But that was, the point of kind of getting together. So out of that conversation, we thought, well, let's start having some of that conversation here. I didn't run it by the executive committee saying that I would go out and meet with those folks. So if there's any concerns about me doing that, then today is a good day to bring that up. But for my part, feedback is, when we're doing these boards and you get moving and you get rolling and you can kind of get into the habit of meeting during your meetings. But I've been receiving some feedback about, some direction things. What should we be working on? Could we or should we be doing more, less, etc. So I thought, well, let's have that conversation today. You can see on the agenda that there's general feedback, opportunities for improvement. If we start here with you all, then I can go to the full partnership and do the individual meetings like I had mentioned, and then see what folks are saying. And nothing's off the table here. This can, including my effectiveness or my work as chair. So leadership's on the table. What we can or can't be doing relative to being under the umbrella of the TJPDC. So for example, we can't make or advocate policy for jurisdictions. So I know sometimes folks were like, well, let's get into an advocacy role. We really can't do that. Because if we were our own maybe separate entity and not commissioned by the TJPDC, then we could do that. We'd have a different mission, vision, etc. So like that would be off the table. If there are things that you feel like we could, because that was part of the conversation Caden and I had talking about, well, maybe we can't advocate, but we can do review work or things like that and comment on what people's initiatives are in their own jurisdictions. Caden, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Do you want to make any additional comments before we kick off and see what folks have to say today?
Yeah, I would like to just start that I have a more in-depth questions attached to the PDF that Ruth sent with the agenda. If people scroll all the way down to the bottom, it's at the end of it. And in each section, there's about 5 sections total, A through E, and each section has its own set of questions in them. And pretty much how this discussion is going to go, we're just going to go through each point, get your thoughts on them. I have some thoughts that I would like to convey to you guys, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. And I'm also going to share the strategic plan too in the chat, because that is something I also have went back and forth and referenced some of the language and some of the goals and missions that we had in plan, in terms of whether or not we're actually meeting our goals and our mission. And I would like to also mention that the whole point of this, I would say, is while looking at the strategic plan, I noticed something on page 34 of the document. It says you have an opportunity to clarify your role. I can't think of how many times this was brought up of like, what does the RHP do? What's our mission? What's our goals? Like, who are we? And I think that this meeting is the start of that. I think this meeting is a really good way to get our concrete identity out there in terms of, hey, like, let's actually readjust or reassess some of the things that we are doing, some things that we like to do, some things we like to continue doing. And I'm excited for this meeting. I've been excited for it. I can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts on things. I have some thoughts as well that I would like to present to you guys. Hopefully they stick. And, that's the whole point of this, is a workshop session. So let's get started. So
Thank you, Caden. And you want to lead us through it? Were you
oh,
prepared to
yeah.
lead us through it? Yeah.
Yeah, I can lead it through. So
Thank you.
I guess just like as an icebreaker, pretty generic, general thing is the first point, feedback. So what are some aspects of the RHP do you find most valuable in supporting your work? If anyone likes to comment on that, and then what do you guys recommend that should be done differently or changed? It can be as anywhere from just our regular meetings convening, they're helpful, or just the newsletters are helpful, things of that nature. Or if there's anything else that you think maybe we could do less of, or things that I'm not really too sure about, but it's like general thoughts.
Who'd like to begin?
And Feel free to say anything. Anything you guys have to say, I'm taking it with full care and full respect. I really want to hear you guys' thoughts on these things, because how I envision the RHP really impacting the community and everyone coming together is a pretty big, impactful way. And I think what you guys it starts with you guys, and so I'm really intrigued by it.
Greg, I saw you unmute. Were you ready to say something?
Well, I'm going to say the obvious. I think the greatest strength is the team that we have and the opportunity to network one-on-one as well as a group. And if that's great, then maybe more is better, which comes later in the agenda.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that point too, because under point E, should the RHP expand their membership, that is also something we're going to get to later on. But I think that networking between each other, just communication is a big emphasis that we do need to focus on. But if there is no other comments for point A, we can get to point B, and I'll just assume that everything we are doing right now is good, and there's not really thoughts on people's minds to change anything as it is right now. But if anything does come to mind later on, please feel free to interrupt me, and then we'll just continue from there. But
Caden, I saw a few mics
Oh.
unmute. So both Kim and Keith, I saw both of you unmute. Do you have some thoughts on item A?
I'll let Kim go first.
Oh, thanks, Keith. I don't have a solution for this, but of course, it's always a struggle for us in the rural areas to be in the fold with everything that's going on in the region. Just due to our distance and being able to meet up in person, and travel in from either Fluvanna or Louisa County for where I cover. And I know Nelson County has some of those struggles as well. So no solutions on that. So I'm kind of throwing it out there. I don't know how we can be better and more engaged. We're kind of floating out here, as little satellites. And that's just, part of the nature of the beast, how we're situated. So, not any criticism or anything. It's just how can we fold better into, the area and have some of our separate needs met that we have, infrastructure wise and that kind of thing, and getting services to our residents, for example, financial opportunities. PHA is, something they love, but it's difficult for them to get in. They'll do it remotely, but it's always, there's challenges like that. So I'm just throwing it out there as something that could be addressed, but I'm not sure how.
We'll
thank you, Kim.
definitely continue to plan to attend remote, virtually. I think bodies like this should be able to meet virtually uninhibited, but and hopefully the state will continue to move in a more liberal direction as relative to these kind of bodies in the work. But certainly, as long as we stay within line with what the code is, just obviously keep planning to meet virtually. Keith, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, staff is awesome, and what you guys are doing is off the charts. So thank you for what you're doing. I think we're going to find a lot out, and a shout out to Laura Jean at the summit, right? We're going to hear a lot of information from the people who we serve, right? If they're private, nonprofit, public bodies, and who the individuals we serve. So we're going to hear a lot of feedback. I think one of the great things for staff in that is listen, right? Walk around and listen to what everybody's talking about in these, it's been structured in such a way so that we have these half-hour networkings, and that's where the magic really happens, in events like that. We obviously can't talk about policy. We can't necessarily advocate, but we can educate, right? And I think that's something that's always been, as one of the beginners or founders of this whole RHP, has always been in the back of my mind, is to be the educator and to bring entities and people of different thoughts on this together and try to get to the end of it that we're working for everybody. So I know that's not an answer per se, but it's where I think at some point, maybe we've been focusing too much on certain details and kind of gotten a little bit away from our road shows, for instance, that night. It was great, right? We got into the elected officials' bodies and say, okay, this is what we are, this is what we do, and this is how we can help. And this is what's going on in your marketplace or whatever in that. So I think more of that is good. That's hard to do with only $4,000 left in the budget, right? It's that my big question is how we're going to function with only 4,000 in the budget, but that's for a different time and conversation. So from my perspective, and Greg said it in much less words than I did, more of the same, right? More reach out, more connection, more being in front of decision makers. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Keith, because in point E, additional opportunities, I listed reporting, and I really think that's a really big opportunity I'm gonna touch on in terms of what the RHP can do in terms of not say advocacy, but like you said, education. And I think if the more we can try to educate people, especially our policymakers in the area, or some of our representatives, the better they can make educated decisions, the better they can try to involve us in conversations, and the better we can be more used as a tool. And I'm gonna jump the gun anyway, but just to reference page 16 of the strategic plan also, we have a section on that for stakeholders, which goes towards elected local government, which what do we expect from them? We want level of engagement, commitment to policy change and funding commitments, political support and commitment to affordable housing funding and projects. So like you're saying, the idea of reporting, and I'm gonna get to break more in detail about how exactly I see reporting happening into between the RHP and who is actually gonna be responsible for that role. But in terms of how that's actually going to be implemented, hopefully that the way we present information to our representatives, the better off they can try to work more with us in terms of, hey, where's some projects or where's some things that I need to know about a certain area or a certain thing that's coming up. So I really like your point on that.
So thank you. So in my world, we use the term "be the source of the source," right?
Mhm.
Right. You know, we're the source, we're the sources, and if we have some time when we get down to an item I'm going to tackle, I'm just going to go over high level where the real world is on the ground with AMI and what people can buy and what people can afford
Mhm.
and that stuff. So
Keith,
anyway,
Keith, your sound is very low today. It's hard to hear you.
oh, hang on a second. My hearing aids may have died on me. Don't get old. Hold on a second. I'll let
Too late for that warning.
Yeah, but I
Is
guess
that better, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my hearing aids. I needed to reconnect them. So anyway, do I need to, because I can't remember what I said, so don't please ask me to repeat it.
We got it.
It's recorded. Whatever it was, it made a lot of sense.
yeah, I guess that kind of brings us to our next point, opportunities for improvement. How can we improve communication and transparency between the RHP and partner organizations? And then can a more proactive form of dialogue be established? This kind of goes back and builds off that idea of reporting. So I think that in between meeting sessions and the times we do meet, there is a lack of communication involved. I think that there's a lack of information sharing between meetings. Not many things are being shared in between those times. And I think that one way we can really try to promote that is through the idea of like maybe just a centralized SharePoint to where people, hey, have projects in mind, they can put it into the file, or just rezoning opportunities, they can put it into the file, just in a way as, like I said, if I wanted to build a report to be sent out, then that could be possible with the right information at hand. So I think that one way we can try to promote communication and more of that information sharing is try to increase the amount of communication we're having in between our meetings, which is something that can be done as simply as just sharing whatever your staff is working on into a centralized file, like I just said. And so I want to know what your guys' thoughts on that in terms of, can this be something where I don't want to put more work on you guys as it is. I don't want to put any more stress on anybody. I just want to, as you're working on something, hey, shoot it across the file rather than me having to constantly bug you guys or try to connect to you guys. And I think it would make things flow a lot efficiently, a lot more effectively if things were just shared through a file where everyone has access to, and then I can build upon that. So what's your guys' thoughts on in terms of how can we increase our communication?
You know, I've observed that some of the key members don't participate much. So, Matt,
Okay.
I think your idea of one-on-one conversations would be very helpful in that regard. You know, why are some of the key players not active participants? They're on the board. They're very busy people. Maybe it means they should delegate to someone else in their organization. Maybe we're not seeming to bring them value, in which case we should have that discussion.
Yeah, that was that's on the radar. Thank you for that, Greg, for endorsing that idea. Yeah. I'll just throw in there that I love Caden's idea of a place to put information. You know, Caden specifically was talking about like projects you're working on or something like that. But what I find when Keith mentions, you know, we educate or we should be educating, you know, to educate others, we may need help educating each other first. And I'll just give an example. If there was a shared place where it wasn't just project updates or putting in things that maybe we might share at a roundtable, but I remember meeting with a couple of developers that are doing projects right now in my district, and they brought me articles from the I think it was the multi-family housing association or something like that. I wouldn't get that information if those gentlemen didn't hand that to me. And I know we all read things. It could be a short article. I've read so many things right now just through the Times on housing and what's going on nationally. That a centralized place where I could just drop the link in there and say, this is a great article on, and then it's there and everybody can read it if they want to. And the same thing that others could do. Keith, I know on his, when he talks and shares sales data and pricing data, because not that I'm going to try to commit Keith to this, but I know he compiles that on a regular basis and could drop that into a place like that. I would imagine Kim and Emily in your world, there's plenty of things that you are reading that, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here, Emily, but if every supervisor in the region could read this article, that would be awesome. Or every developer or whatever. That I think there's something here to where we could kind of become a housing place for a lot of information across all those different, I mean, think about, I mean, our pillars, right? All the different industry or the sectors that it would cover based on our full membership that I think there's a good idea here that could spark some pretty impressive little collection of information for one. In addition to us learning from it ourselves, then we could find a way maybe to open that up for the public to be able to access access some of that information too. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of the cart here, but or the horse, I suppose. But I think there's some merit here or something here to maybe work on. Others thoughts on that, or Keith?
Yeah, so may not be the appropriate place, and I think this is just an organic conversation we're having. You know what really worked well during COVID, and I'm going to preface this by saying, wow, we only got $4,000, right? But what worked really well during COVID was these virtual lunch and learns, back to, you know, getting out there. And maybe there's a plan here where we can set up some sort of sponsorship scenario where somebody, whatever we figure out what our cost is to actually put that on, and then start having, you know, regularly once a month or something like this, lunch and learn scenarios where people can dive in and folks can go over numbers or whatever. But I thought they were super effective. Now, that was probably because of COVID, right? But I think having that as a regularly incurring education component of some sort would actually be a good thing to do. I don't know how much it's going to cost. Don't know if we got the staff to do it. And maybe this is something to look at in our next fiscal year instead of this fiscal year. But if we can figure out a way to get people to sit still and listen to us for half an hour or 45 minutes and throw in some Q&A in it, it might not be a bad idea. Because to your point, Ned, I only can imagine how much stuff you get to read, right? You know, everybody on this call reads a lot. And with me, anything above a third grade level takes me much longer to go through. But in any event, it's got to have a lot of pictures in it. But so I think I would encourage that, guys. That would
And
be my
I mean, a
2 cents.
lot of the stuff can be, you know, I'm loving right now one of the news sites that I'm following, or it's like a podcast. It's but they tell you how long the article will take you to read right up front. It's like, this will be a 6-minute read. And you're like, oh, I can do that. But you know, right now, just do it. But any other thoughts on this information sharing idea? Like I would just think like general interest with so many people involved. I mean, it would be nice. I think the potential for a lot of eclectic info, and it could be videos or links to talks. It wouldn't necessarily all have to just be written stuff, I suppose.
There are so many good podcasts out there. I think that would be great. The only addition I was going to make is that I think it would be helpful if at least once a month there could be a push out of like, here's what we received over the past month or something like that. That wouldn't take a lot of effort. You wouldn't have to format it nicely like a newsletter, but it would just be a reminder, like take a few minutes and look at this stuff.
Yeah, a reminder that it's there and you can do it quick. Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's Christine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think another thing is not just the continued call to go request what's in there, but to ask more regularly for specific resources on a topic. So I'm thinking of this idea of the lunch and learns and dropping resources and even perhaps following the summit. You know, there might be topics where we're saying, oh, if we just had another hour or two to dive into that further than you're able to in a summit, we could say, all right, the focus this next month or this next quarter is going to be on this topic. Let's find resources and distribute resources on that very specific thing versus just like a general library of resources.
That's great.
Yeah, I love that. I think it also would be really helpful to do a mini needs assessment of what would be of interest to people. And I don't know how broad that would be or who it would go out to best serve the partnership. But the folks who aren't participating, I imagine it's probably just because there's so many competing things for their time. And if we knew how to make it more helpful or, you know, what would make it valuable to them, then that might increase our participation.
Any other thoughts on this one? Caden, do you think we address the questions and kind of let you be the judge? I'm writing a lot of notes, so.
Yeah, all this input is really great. I think great food for thought. I like the idea of the lunch and learn, just getting together. I think that kind of goes into the point of engagement in events. We'll get to that after the next one, but yeah, I do appreciate all that input. I guess this one kind of goes in. I know that our strategic plan as it is right now is ending as of this year. It goes from 2022 to 2025. So this is something that we might want to start thinking about if we need to make any type of amendments or adjustments to it. But point C as it is what emerging housing challenges should the RHP prioritize in the coming year? What innovative housing solutions have you seen elsewhere that we could implement locally? And how should the strategic plan and tangible goals be established? I think that second part of that kind of goes into the information sharing of like, hey, have you seen a project or this is housing initiatives being done in this county or this is being done in this state? How can we implement this in our locality. So that kind of goes on the point of information sharing. But I guess in terms of what this point is trying to, this question is trying to emphasize is, all right, what are some things that that we probably should prioritize more in terms of readjusting our strategic plan, in terms of what should we try to include as one of our missions and goals that we want to get done going into this next year or just next following years, other than what we're doing. But if we're doing everything that you think that we should as it is, then we don't really need to go more in depth into this question.
I always wonder how best to, and I know, like I saw Kim at the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference, and a lot of times when you go to conferences like that, that part about what have you seen elsewhere that we could implement locally? Because a lot of times it is other localities sharing what has worked in their communities. I mean, there's so many sessions around topics like that. I remember one standing out in Norfolk from a conference, good grief, that was probably 3 conferences ago. But how to collect that when different people go to different places and bring that back. I mean, that, again, I guess we haven't had a place for people to put the information into, so that the idea of having a place to collect it could work. But all those conferences, I believe, offer up the information in the recording so people could go back and view it electronically. I think they do that. At least the information, I think, can still be gathered, even if it's not a video of the actual session. I think the bullet 1, I forget who said it earlier, maybe about, I think the summit may help us figure out number 1, or, point 1 under C. I love the idea of focusing on something each quarter that maybe is pertinent, but I think maybe our ears are, all of our ears are tuned in to folks at the summit to hear what comes up. But I'll stop there. Colette, I saw your mic.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, isn't the cost of housing a huge challenge, particularly in this area? And, how do you bring the sources of money that you need to make an affordable housing project work? I just know from the projects that we're working on, I mean, I know the city and the county would have loved to seen us, be building already, but the process is just so onerous. I mean, even when you're working with local organizations like PHA, they're now saying they're out into 26 for the LIHTC application for our project, and they're gonna have to phase the development on Piedmont over maybe 3 years, and I don't know when we're gonna see the first units. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of that. It's not where my expertise is, but it's a real struggle.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Providing land,
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Colette, because if there were people whose expertise we could draw on, it could save us a lot of time.
Well, I know that we've learned that this is a much more complicated issue than we would have ever imagined to, make the commitment we did and then try to deliver on it.
Well, and I think that, we just, in the county, had to rezone the RST, wasn't able to get their tax increment funding. New developer bought it, and, we had to reduce our, we had 70% affordable units up there and had to reduce it back down to 20.
Yeah.
And lost the AMI piece.
I mean, like the Wurtland project, I mean, this is just what kind of frustrates me generally, is that they're going back to the BAR for the 3rd time. Mm-hmm. Now, if Charlottesville is so desperate for affordable housing, and this is 100% affordable housing, what the heck, why can't the BAR figure out how to approve the darn design?
Yeah, you probably would have a bunch of developers coming up and high-fiving you right now.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it's just, there's not alignment between the goals and the process that you have to go through to achieve the goal. It's really, I don't know.
Is it the BAR or the Neighborhood Development Services?
No, it's BAR.
That's really interesting because it's somehow historic.
Well, yeah, the Wordland, yeah, that
In the
Okay.
district.
area it's in the historic.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not the buildings per se, but it's in the district.
Well, I haven't dealt with the BAR, but when we were first working on public housing redevelopment, there were some major slowdowns at NDS at that point, and this is years ago. And it really helped to bring people and pack the room to show that the community wants to see this move forward, to put some pressure on the officials. And it, moved immediately out of that room. You got a lot of advocates at your fingertips.
Yeah, right.
That Norfolk project that I mentioned earlier was a redevelopment, but what they did ahead of, before any applications got processed, they basically did a form-based code type of overlay that everybody agreed on. So by the time that developers or whoever was bringing the project form, they basically had a catalog, and as long as you built the spec that was in that catalog, you were approved.
Yeah.
So it cut out the review process step. It front-loaded it. The Norfolk had to do that up front, but then once it was done, and that can take that step out, like our RIO 29 small area plan. I often wonder if people remember that optional overlay comes with form-based code, and you basically, if you meet it, you got it. It's already been signed off by the ARB. The ARBs are BAR.
We had additional impediments similarly, but on a different avenue, where our project had to be completely redesigned based on wetlands delineation. And then we had to purchase $150,000 worth of wetlands credits, and I can't remember the other credits. We had to do, and Laura Jean knows all about this, we had to do another study for environmental assessment because it was over 4 units, right? So our tiny little project of 25 units for affordable housing gets more and more expensive. So yeah, navigating all of the bureaucratic levels that we've had to negotiate. We haven't even gotten to the, through the permitting process completely. The county's been great on getting that approved, but it's been higher level, because we're using HUD funds. So yeah, having some education on different funding sources for us would be helpful, or helping to navigate through. We had to figure out what kind of nutrient banks we needed to go to get these nutrient credits, which is, all of these things are a challenge in and of themselves and chew up our time. It takes longer to put the affordable housing into place, and it increases the costs of affordable housing. It's becoming very, very expensive affordable housing.
So I just dropped the white paper in the chat that I wrote and circulated amongst all my fellow real estate agents. The whole idea of why I thought the RHP was important is because of the lack of this missing gap between zoning and site plan, and between zoning and approval. And, both Greg and I used to have hair before we started doing this stuff. And I'll tell a quick little story. The very first development I ever did was in 97. It was 150 lot central water and sewer rezoning, had to go through the same alphabet approval. And it took me 6 months to buy, close, rezone, get site plan approval, and put a bulldozer on the job site. You are now 8 years before that can happen on most projects. And that costs money. That is the reason why you can't do that. Colette, if you probably don't remember a cup of coffee you and I had, I told you that this is not going to be as easy as you think it was going to be, and it isn't. So the whole premise of the regional housing partnership is to put these bodies together so we can have a conversation about this, right? And the struggle, I represent a nonprofit, which is the Piedmont Community Land Trust. We have that same struggle of having to get projects rezoned, approved. The reason why the city of Charlottesville does not take advantage of their new zoning policy is nothing to get past site plan. Right? And it becomes stop. Now, I'm part of a couple national cohorts, one out of UW, out of Washington, another Portland State University. One of the things that happened out there to help move their needle forward on providing affordable housing, it's not a link, Kim, I literally dropped the whole thing as in text, because I'm not smart enough how to figure out how to turn it into a link. But what they did, now this is money, resources. So what's happening out there is your projects, Colette, had one person at the city that navigated it from the beginning to the end. And part of the problem is when projects are going 6 months, 6 years, staff rotate. And then you go 12 steps forward, 6 steps back, 4 steps forward, 12 steps back. And this just keeps on going. So if there's a way to efficiently get a project from point A to point B, and I'm not even talking about the politics of it. I'm talking about after it's approved to get it to the ground, to get there. That is, if there's anything we can figure out a way to help people understand, man, that would be an awesome thing for this body to achieve. Don't know if we can or can't, but you know, this impacts nonprofits and for-profits and local governments who want to build, and universities that want to do it. So it's somehow way, if we can reduce this, I don't want to use bureaucracy, but it's the only word that's popping into my head right now. The better we'll all be off. Well, we're in prison. If you take a look at that, areas that did this, areas that actually redid their zoning and redid their site plan, the increases on year over year prices are half of what they are in different jurisdictions. There's about half a dozen of them I cite in there. So it helps stabilize prices. It brings in inventory into it, and we kind of move forward. I know it's a little bit soapboxes, but I'm out at the right now outside of this body preaching this to whoever will listen to me, and so it's super frustrating, but hopefully some way we can come together and do it, because Colette, if you get this thing done in another 3 to 10 years from now, that would be a miracle. Anyway, there you go. I'm off my soapbox.
So I'm sitting in my DC office today. I was awarded a project in 2016 that I'm hoping to break ground this year. So this is a pretty universal problem. That's not going to make anybody feel any better. You know, I will say that I think the rezoning in the city is going to help, but you're right, now it's more apparent than ever that the site plan process is broken.
Well, they just made it too difficult, right? And
well, when you've got a civil engineer that can hold up a project for a year, it's
well, it's
not very
I
enlightening.
mean, well, there's things that if to speak about the city that they can do that can streamline it. For instance, instead of having a 3-lot minimum, make it a 6-lot minimum, right? For a major minor site plan, instead of having a 10,000, what is it? The state lets them go up to 10,000 square feet of disturbance. Instead of 4,000, make it 6,000. There's ways that they could do this. Going back to my education component, who's educating them on this, right? That's the key thing, right? Who's educating them on this, and who is sitting down and saying, hey, folks, you know, if you change this, this, and this, we can Colette can get this project moving faster. I'm just talking about what we can control locally, right? We can't control, I mean, if everybody thinks federal money is going to happen, forget about it. It ain't going to happen, right? So, you know, what can we control locally so Colette can put units in the ground and fulfill a commitment that the university made? Anyway, I'm back on soapbox, so Ned's gonna yell at me, so I'm gonna hang up.
Oh, this is,
So I think a specific emerging, what's your language here? Emerging housing challenges. Hopefully it'll be addressed somewhat at the summit. And Keith, you just alluded to it. And it's HUD, which has just made things even more challenging everywhere.
Well, most of the people on here know me well enough. I'm not that smart, but I've been around business long enough to know that there's cycles. And as the chair of the land trust 2 years ago, I started them to say, we have to stop depending on federal money and start going out and finding private sector money for our subsidies that we're doing. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but to Colette's point, you know, on the sales side, right? Because that's the world I know. And again, we'll tackle this a little bit later. You really can at 80% AMI go above about a 215, 225 sales price. So in order to produce a unit, you're probably in the $400,000 to $500,000 range in today's environment. So where do you come up with that extra $200,000, right? That's the big question. And when we get to it, because we're going to talk about where the land trust is changing its AMI from 80 to 115, is because we're trying to figure out ways around that mathematical problem.
Hayden, you want to take us to the next one, just in the interest of time? Not that I'm wanting to cut off dialogue, but just being mindful of our schedule.
Yeah, I can take us to the next point. You sounded a little bit low right there now. I'm
Yeah,
not
we
sure if
kind
it
of
was.
lost your sound, Ned.
Better? Is it voice?
No, it's like underwater or something.
Well, you guys go ahead and see if I've got.
Check your hearing aids, Ned.
It's like,
Yeah, but yeah, just to continue with the conversation, I think the next point, the engagement in events is yeah, we kind of touched on that a little bit. Like, obviously, involved with the housing summit, and then we talked about the potential of creating a lunch and learn. That is something I also thought of, like just trying to increase like moments to where we can try to get the full partnership body, just engaging more in terms of might have a set location to meet for everyone, just to have conversations, more casually over lunch or just some type of event. I'm aware of the budget and how that might impact that, but that is just something for thought. But I think a lot of the problems you guys mentioned, I think this next point, should the RHP expand their membership, can really, if we do it strategically, can really help out a lot with that. And I'm more so on the end of, yes, we should expand it in terms of just looking back at the strategic plan. One of the things it mentions was how local government, nonprofit agencies, community, and business will consistently engage to share ideas. And I think that's something that if we do it in a way to where we have a set network of developers, a set network of contractors, a set network of businesses who are willing to support the RHP, or just at least willing to spread the information out there. Because it's just like Kim was saying, that it's also like just people's expertise we can rely on. If we can, all it has to do is the RHP has to reach the right ear, and then once it goes from there, it's who you know and what you know. And then once people start spreading the word about it more, I think it can make people more inclined and try to be in more support of some of our initiatives. It can just be simply just reaching out to, let's say, the local Lowe's or a Home Depot in terms of how people are getting their supplies, in terms of funding, or just bringing materials for projects and such things as that. And I know that Ned potentially mentioned, how do we generate revenue with RHP in terms of, let's say, the housing summit, if we do end up getting money from that. One of the ways that I know that some people might not be inclined of this, but let's say like the RHP has dues. And let's say the more we expand our membership, and then the more we can try to say, hey, if you pay us dues, you will then become our first direct line of contact in terms of how we get our resources from, and in terms of who we contact first and for our projects, and ways we can try to help with future things in that nature. So I think that all this is food for thought, and I think that expanding our membership in terms of, and if I know one concern is during roundtable sessions, if it does seem that it's too big, we can have set groups of, all right, the developers will have a speaker who would then relay the information beforehand, given to that person, and they will speak it out in terms of the whole group. And then we just have obviously you guys on each locality will then present your information based off the information shared to you. That way we can have a more concise and more efficient way of going through our roundtable sessions if we do fear that we have gone too big. But I think that going big enough will this ultimately help the RHP in every aspect positively. And I don't really see much negative aspects to it, but also I do think that the building relationships with the potential of potentially monetizing them in terms of paying dues to the RHP could potentially help us generate revenue. But this is just food for thought, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on potentially increasing RHP.
Let me test my mic. Can you all hear me better now?
Yes, yes.
Figured it out. All right, feedback, comments?
As broad as we can make the RHP, the better it is for everyone. I think it would be good to involve more private industry. We've certainly done better at reaching out to local companies for in-kind donations, and they want to be involved. They see the problems. They actually, they go to people's houses and they see the issues that are going on. Their employees are the ones experiencing the housing shortages. They're part of the labor market. So the construction and real estate business ought to be actively involved in this, as we have some people here already. Yeah, why not expand it further?
I'm
Well,
all for expanding, Kim, but I like what Caden has said, that, as an advocate of roundtables, when you start getting 20, 30, 40 people, it becomes a bit unwielding. So I like the sector chime in concept, where, the private sector chimes in and they have one or two people that are kind of talking about that, nonprofits and so forth and so on. I think that makes a best use of the time of the meeting on that. But I've always felt that more is better, not necessarily in the quarterly meetings anyway. But I think if we are able to resurrect the lunch and learns where we're getting in front of people a little bit more, I think we'll get more engagement that way. And not only will get more engagement that way, I think people will start having a clearer vision of what we're doing. Because we'll be out a little bit more in the public end of it. But that's my 2 cents for that.
It seems it addresses Kim's concern. Also, it's easy to attend a lunch and learn from wherever.
I love the lunch and learns. I see the private sector learning what we do, and they're always amazed. They're like, wow, I didn't know this existed. We didn't know we could participate. We didn't know. So as the broader, and I agree, I do not want an unwieldy organization. I don't think you're going to get anything done. But to have people and being in the private sector, they can't always attend everything, but they might want to be a part of it and start using it for their own marketing. Say, hey, we're involved. We're trying, increase the amount of donations that we receive for people who want to contribute to keep the RHP going. Just kind of cast a little broader net. Doesn't mean you have to increase the number of people at a meeting or, who are involved in subcommittees. Yeah, so definitely, if this is any larger of a group, you're not going to get anything done.
And add to that, and Ned says this all the time, and I agree with him 100%. It's amazing when you do these roundtables and you start talking, because jurisdictions realize, oh, hey, we have the same problem. Same thing happens between the private sector and, let's say, government, right? Because sometimes they're speaking past each other, right? And environments like that, they go, well, hold it, you've got the same problem I've got, right? And let's figure out a way to work together to achieve the goal that everybody's trying to achieve. And that is kind of the premise of this body, from my perspective, is that we get into these discussions that folks are open to have them. And Greg and I, who's on the private sector end of it, goes, oh, we now understand the struggle that Ned's having, right? And maybe we can bring a private sector solution to it. And conversely, Ned is sitting there and going, well, hold it, I didn't really realize a development cost this much or whatever, right? I'm just arbitrarily picking items and that's where I think the secret sauce, from my perspective, has always been in this body, is those type of discussions. And I think really, and Laura Jean is, and her team and staff is just, I can't speak enough how awesome of a job they're doing for the summit. But I'm excited for these network things. I'm gonna be wandering around listening with my hearing aids and my tape recorder, but listening to conversations, because I think that's where the magic's going to happen.
Those hearing aids don't have a recording option? That'd be awesome.
Actually, they do.
They do? I was gonna say, I would,
Yeah.
the new age stuff, you could record. That's great.
It's very good for somebody who has CRS.
Are there any other, Kate, did we get through? Did we get through all the questions?
The last thing was just additional opportunities, but
Oh,
we
we
pretty
didn't get
much,
the,
yeah, we covered pretty much most of those points, but in terms of just everything we just talked about accumulated, in terms of like who's actually going to be trying to do some of this work, obviously, I said that the VIS will facilitate management, maintenance, and production of communication efforts within the RHP, and I think that is something that will help out in terms of some of that. I know the concern is looking at the budget as well as or who's going to be putting aside staff time towards this, but I do know that TJPDC is renewing the role for the Vista this next coming year as well. But if it does so happen that the TJPDC decides not to have a Vista, that I do know that CRHA has a Vista role over there. I do know that PHA has a Vista role. It could be as simply as asking them, hey, we would like to update that Vista's assignment description to include work to actually help facilitate the most of this work being done with the RHP in terms of just information building. Once we build upon our network, once we increase our member sizes, once we have an influx of information being shared, well, now we need someone who's actually going to compile everything together. And I think that's where Corlett can also try to help with that last point, can a relationship with the UVA form a work opportunity for students? I know that in a lot of those the graduate programs that I know there's a lot of students looking for work while they're continuing their studies. It could be simply as asking UVA, do they have some type of program or some type of sponsorship they could do for students in creating a work opportunity for the RHP for them to get involved with their communities, whatever their interests are or may be. I know it's obviously funding is involved with that, but it could be as simply as just reaching out and asking around and just trying to pull some strings there. This is really just to try to, all right, now that we generated all these new ideas, how do we get them to actually go follow through? And I don't want to I don't want to put all the work on a road that may or may not possibly be there. So this is just a contingency plan in terms of if the Vista role cannot fulfill its role.
Ned, do you mind if I ask Colette a question?
yeah, go ahead.
Colette,
Maybe you should have asked Colette that question.
If Colette doesn't want to answer it, she won't, I'm sure of that. Is there a communication school or program within UVA that can help us get the education portion or communication portion of that out? Is there some resource there that we can tap into? I'm just going back to finding outside sources to help staff when we have a pretty tight budget. So just curious if there's any space there to participate and help.
Well, I mean, we have internships. I mean, I think that it's probably the best point of contact is through our career services office. But I don't know whether you're talking about an unpaid internship or a paid internship.
I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about, is there another source here to help us get information and educate out there to, just throwing an idea out at the table. And real quick, Lori Jean has, if you don't mind, emailing out to everybody this white paper. When you guys read it, please understand that it's written as me making a pitch to 1,400 real estate agents to get engaged in this conversation we're having, right? So it's tailored towards them. The information and the data is accurate, but you know, it's a call to action
Uh-oh.
for 1,400 fellow real estate agents to not sit on their hands and get engaged. So just when you read it, it's from that perspective.
Hey, Keith, I wonder if there's someone writing a master's or a PhD thesis right on housing who would want to be engaged.
Man, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of different pieces of that puzzle floating around. It just doesn't seem to be, you know, I'm sure UVA folks might have a better read on it, but the folks that I'm working with at UW and Portland, they do that, but it's just nobody's really putting all these pieces together, right, into one thing, for lack of a better term. But that's a great thing. Some of the people I chat to on a national level, I'll ask.
Yeah, just to jump in on that, Ruth and I had actually talked a little bit about this, you know, having been a grad student not long ago at UVA. You know, I think it's one thing to ask a master's student just to do it sort of as their thesis, but there's lots of, you know, things that like the Equity Center, or, you know, we've already sort of spoken a little bit about IEN, you know, maybe that's not the exact mission overlap there, but there's a lot of these sort of institutions built into UVA that draw on grad students and undergrads as well. I feel certain that there's a way to harness that somehow. It may be really convoluted, but I was talking to Ruth a little bit about that. I think it's worth sort of further exploration. It may be more on the academic side of things as opposed to, you know, and maybe, you know, Colette, where your sort of offices run, but
Yeah, I imagine there's work being done in the architecture school.
yeah, which is where I sort of got my degree. And, you know, there's a ton, even just in amongst the architects, you know, students, there, you know, studios whose professors, you know, work in the area. So I don't know. I think there's probably some way to leverage that. And I think I'm going to talk to Ruth a little bit more about what we might be able to do there. Looks like we lost Ned,
Oh, yeah, we did.
who is in the other room over here. I could go check on it, but
Why don't you go do that if you don't mind? Because otherwise, I guess I got to run this thing.
yeah, I'll see what's going on.
Please, I appreciate that.
Oh, God, no, don't
Um,
let me do it.
So, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, Hayden, while we're waiting for him to get back on, and it looks like looking at the time clock here, we're running past a few things. Did you get what you needed so we can move on to the next couple items? We've got an end time here of 3:30.
Yeah, that was all the points we really need to get covered, and
Yeah.
I think it was really helpful hearing the thoughts you guys had to say, especially when it comes to increasing the size of the membership. I do think that after this housing summit, in our next full body partnership, bringing the ideas along to them and saying, hey, here's some of the things that we ended up producing from our conversation, and we would like to know some more input on your guys' end in terms of how you see this going. What are some areas that you guys think you guys can try to increase the capacity for the RHP? In terms of, I think it really just comes down to like who's in our network and not like who's actually having these conversations with us, which we're better off in the end. So when Ned gets back, hopefully we can get ready near to convene the meeting. So
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. It froze and then I just got bounced. So I'm sorry, did things just get wrapped up on that agenda item then?
Yeah, I kind of jumped in there and see if Caden had anything new to add before we moved on, but it's back to you, sir.
Well, Caden, I really appreciate the coordinating the conversation. This is probably one of the better conversations I remember having in a while at the executive committee. So thank you for that. And then Caden and I will get together and kind of summarize the conversation and make sure we put that back out to everyone. I'm running a little behind, Keith. I think you're up next with the where's my agenda again?
Thanks, Ned. I think we touched a lot of it. So, you know, we're a few minutes behind. So I'm just going to kind of make this a little short. It kind of tied into the whole conversation that we had. I was going to do a little bit more of a formal slides and all that stuff, but I'm going to kind of reduce it down to a minute or two. So we at the Piedmont Community Land Trust have just upped our AMI from 80 to 115%. And that doesn't mean we're going to try to get to 80% AMI. And the reason we've done this is first of all a trend in the nation to go to the higher AMIs, and it's mainly because of mortgage rates, right? So when you start pegging something to a fixed 80% AMI and no built-in flexibility to grow, you hit this ceiling and we can't help folks. So just to put it in perspective, and Ned and his board was gracious enough to to grant the Piedmont Community Land Trust $650,000 back in 21 and 22 to produce 30 units, which we partnered with Stanley Martin Homes and 2 developments, and we did that. We were at a sale point of 215 to 225 and at 80% AMI and roughly 4% mortgage. We were going through about a 10-to-1 ratio, 10 people that actually income qualified and was able to acquire a loan, right, on their income. Now at 265, because we've got one that we're reselling through the formula at 115, I'm at a 40-to-1 ratio. I've got 40 people that are coming through our program that we're trying to qualify at 115%. And that's because interest rates for these particular buyers are north of 8%. Just something to keep in mind, even though the 30-year mortgage rate might be floating around 7, it is 100% based on your credit score. And some of these folks are getting a point extra because of credit score. So it's just back to the conversation of costs and cost of more borrowing money and so forth and so on. This is becoming that much more difficult to do from a producer perspective, from a perspective of somebody actually, or an entity trying to actually produce units and put affordable housing buyers in homes. So, Kim will know that for sure, that it's much harder now than it was 24 months ago or 36 months ago. So I think the only thing that I would point out is for the, though 80% is a kind of a goal standard that everybody's trying to hit, that number's starting to raise now, and a lot of entities are starting to increase. I know Richmond has done it to 100 to 115%. And what we're finding out at the current interest rate and the prices of where we need to be, even with all the subsidy we're bringing to the table, it's literally the same buyer that was buying back in 2022 at 80% AMI and 4%. They just can't afford now this point. So what I guess I wanted to get about this particular topic is more for some of programs and so forth and so on out there. Some flexibility should be worked into the program to allow for market conditions, particularly at mortgage rates, the up and down. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. We've kind of went through a lot of it through Caden's presentation. So, and to go ahead and make best use of everybody's time, that's pretty much it. I had numbers and charts and all that fun stuff, but if anybody's interested, they can call me offline and we can start talking about where trends are going as far as actual pricing for homes. Was that short enough?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Any questions about anything Keith mentioned?
I don't have so much a question as just a gut reaction, which is that I understand why this might be needed, but that AMI is what, like $150,000?
$133,000 for a family of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're having
That's
trouble getting people to qualify at that.
right.
What we find though is that we have 2 people with maybe
Yes, this is
$55,000
family.
to $65,000 bringing in an income, right? So you have a teacher and a firefighter, and they don't qualify because combined they make too much money. So if it's not quite as restricted, it's helpful. And like that workforce housing program that the governor announced. It can go to 120% AMI and even 150% AMI for the rural areas. So the rural areas that have a further decreased AMI at 100%, they might be having even more trouble qualifying. So it kicks, for some of our programming, people who have to be below 50% AMI in Louisa would qualify in Fluvanna, but they don't qualify in Louisa because Fluvanna uses the Charlottesville AMI index. And Louisa's is harder to get qualified. So if it's $30,000 in Fluvanna, it's 27,000 maybe in Louisa, and they don't make it because they make 29,000. So having a little more flexibility in AMI, I know that sounds high, but when you have two people who are working, that's who we want to target. So just from, and I know you don't work in that particular sector, but that's sort of our perspective of what we're seeing as a hindrance. So I think that's really helpful, Keith, if you're able to increase it without, and your goal is not to find people who can afford it on their own. This does target the right people that I think we want to assist.
Kim, you've done what I didn't do, which was explain it much better. So thank you. It's household, right? And to the point that I was trying to make is we're helping the same. So in my world, it's called a buyer profile, right? We're helping the same buyer now, which is the two teachers, the two folks that are making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a person, pooling their income together. So it's household income, which is the 133. But to your point, we now were not able to serve the people we were serving in 2022. And that's where we said, we've got to raise our AMI because otherwise we're not able to help people, right? On that point. So Kim, thank you for doing a much better job than I ever did.
And can you put a mechanism in place so that the person who, say, it's a two-parent household, but one parent doesn't work and one parent works in tech and makes $140,000 and they have two kids, so they're meeting your AMI, but they are relatively wealthy. Can you put something in place that discourages that or makes that person less qualified than the two-person heads of household who are earning a modest wage, each of them?
So the way we do it, it's all based on the HUD formulas that they put out every year, the AMI formula, which is based on number of households. So if there's 4 people, and I don't have the number in front of me, but if it's 4 people, it's 2 folks and 2 children, right? Whatever it is, whatever that household income is, that's what the household income is. If it's multiple people or one, that's how we manage that issue.
Yeah, the line is the line, but in my experience, people that you're worried about, Emily, are not ending up in our pipeline.
100%. Yeah, well, I mean, the big problem goes back to the conversation that we're having with Colette. Would we, as the land trust, want to do 40%, 30% AMI? Absolutely. The problem is where is all the subsidy coming from? That's the problem, right? It's all about dollars. And, if we were able to, right now, this one transaction, we're talking about a 265 on 820 National Street that we're working on. We're going to bring $50,000 of subsidy to the table to make that happen, right? And that's at 115% AMI. If we want to make this 150 or whatever it is, it's just that much more subsidy that we have to come, and that's the struggle. And that's something we at the nonprofit level anyway, is working on trying to figure out. And that's what I set in motion 2 years ago to go ahead, and we got to stop relying on government because it's going to dry up, and we've got to go start knocking on these high net worth individuals or corporations and start building a fund of some sort. But anyway, hopefully that helps you, Emily.
Thank you. Lori Jean, are you there? Do you want to give a quick update on this upcoming summit next month already coming up? Is that a no? Lori Jean, are you there?
She actually had to go grab somebody from outside, but she's
It should
heading
be
back to her
inside.
desk right now.
Oh,
She'll be right there.
I thought I heard the little door chimes going.
Yeah, she'll be right there.
The timing could not have been worse. Sorry, guys. Someone just dropped off a check and I was trying to catch them. So, I missed whatever happened in the last 2 minutes. But, so I'm assuming we're at the point.
Summit, if you,
Summit,
just give
is
us
that
a
what
quick update on the summit. Can you hear me?
Are you guys able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Oh, timing. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, my sound is really bad. I'm gonna just, okay. Sorry, that just like, I was like paying attention the whole time and then that really threw me. I just ran outside trying to catch someone. Okay, so yeah, for the summit, our events are both sold out at 57 and 211 attendees. The full budget has been met and then some a little bit, but the RHP is giving some, so I think it's just sort of decreasing the amount that the RHP is giving. I have been having final meetings with our speakers. We're gonna have some really phenomenal content that will offer a lot of new ideas and tools and partnerships to our region. So I think that's going to be amazing. Something to keep in mind, we're really going to be pushing the post survey this time. There will be QR codes everywhere. The final sessions will have announcements in them and the QR codes will be on the screens. We're really going to encourage it. We really want to have feedback this time. We really haven't gotten feedback either of the previous 2 summits. And that makes it really hard to fundraise for the next summit when you don't have any data on outcomes from the previous summit. So we're really going to be pushing that. And if you guys can help participate in encouraging that while you're there, that would be really great. We're going to be clear that, we want to collect feedback to see how we're doing. We also want to be able to obtain future funding. And as you guys mentioned already in this meeting, you want to be able to use it in planning next steps for what is needed. So that's just something to keep in mind. We have our final meeting with the planning committee before the summit tomorrow morning at 10. If anyone would like to join just to hear more, you're welcome to just reach out to me and I'll add you in. But yeah, that's the basic update.
Great. That's good news on the fundraising that got costs covered and bringing down our end. That's great.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori Jean. Thank you and thank you. You did some outstanding work.
Thank you.
Out of show of hands, how many people here are going to attend the summit?
I think it's everybody.
All right. So I thank you, Lori Jean. I was doing this for a reason. Thank you. So during the networking things, they're gonna have these QR codes around, and it's gonna be really important for Caden and what these folks we're talking about today is when you're starting to nudge with people, say, hey, did you do it? Pull up a QR phone, say, pull out your phone, do it. Really, it's going to be really incumbent upon us as RHP members to go ahead and make sure that the people attending fill these out, because I think this is going to give staff a lot of forward thinking information. The questions are awesome, and there's plenty of room for them to add to it and add some of their additional information. So a little bit of a call to action for everybody here is start elbowing with people, and if they haven't filled it out, stick with them until they do. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. So Lori Jean, I think in the interest of time, we're going to have to skip the housing study update and we'll go right to the roundtable just because I know some folks may needing to jump off right at time. I'm just going to go across the bottom of my screen. Colette, I see you first. Do you want to give a roundtable update?
Yeah, sure. Our 3 projects are progressing, albeit perhaps slowly. But, you know, Wirtland is the farthest ahead and they, POA is planning to put their application in for LIHTC next month. Piedmont is, a little bit behind that. They're targeting 2026 for their LIHTC application. Both of those projects are, targeting 100% affordable. Whereas the North Fork project is more of a mixed bag, you know, including market rate housing. We've got an RFQ out on North Fork for the developer. That'll come back and be evaluated, and then we'll go to an RFP on a slim down list of candidate developers. So that's kind of where we are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Greg, I got you next in line here.
I find it interesting. We've been struggling for years to not be too unmanageable a board. And maybe the problem is we're calling everybody a board member on the one hand, and on the other hand, wanting to increase participation. We even had a consultant address this and we did nothing about it. My solution is I'm stepping off my board position to let a younger architect into the inner circle. So it seems to me that we need to find more ways to get participation without necessarily making the board more unruly. So roundtables and lunch and learns seem like really good ideas that were floated today that maybe can accomplish increasing participation without necessarily increasing the size of the board. Just a thought. Just a logistics thing. It looks like the board meeting is the same afternoon as the reception, as opposed to being after the summit. So where is the board meeting?
It's in Water Street Center.
So then we just all walk up to the,
Yes,
okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Emily, I got you next.
My head is not very centered at the moment, but I've been working some on Albemarle County's budget and commitment to housing, and the county executive just released the budget today, which does a lot more to boost the police force and has a 4-cent tax increase on real estate tax rates, and does a little more on housing. And the other thing I've been working quite a bit on is Midway Manor, which is a site for people who are elderly and have disabilities that's right downtown. And they've had some pretty significant management issues, which have gotten a lot better in the past couple weeks.
Thank you, Keith.
I think everybody heard enough from me today, so I think that'll be it, sir.
Well, Emily gave the update on some of the budget, which I got to see myself right at noon today. We are also been going through AC 44, which is our comp plan. And if you haven't listened in on some of the rural or development area conversations, there's a lot more being discussed about the development area than has probably ever been discussed by a county board, Albemarle County board, including in our last meeting, we got criteria of what maybe if these criteria were met of rural area land could swap into the development area if development area may be swapped back out to the rural area. So at least having the discussion of, well, what might it look like? It wasn't development area expansion, but it might be more strategic in how we're using properties, things like being close to sewer and water already, that sort of stuff. So there've just been different levels of conversation than I ever recall ever happening at our board. And outside of that, I think some of the other things that I mentioned during the meat of the meeting, since the budget's out there. But yeah, definitely pay attention to the budget. This will be that little bit for housing that Emily mentioned. The tax increase, the 0.4 cents, would be dedicated ongoing to affordable housing, which we've not done before. We've always given one-time monies to it. So this would be the first time we're actually saying operational dollars, not just one-time dollars, would be going to affordable housing. It amounts to $1.2 million, which, I think a lot of us would like to see be higher. But it is, I've learned on the Albemarle board that when you can get first steps are big. So getting this ongoing money, if provided all the supervisors support it, by the time we're done, it would be a big deal. But there you have it, folks. Got some chats going here. If there's a chat going on between me and somebody, I will follow up with you direct and we'll figure out a few things. But it is 3:30. I know you all have some other stuff to do. But I appreciate y'all being here. This was a great meeting. And Caden and I, like I said, will push out the summary of the conversation and then we'll move forward and probably be giving some updates on what we've done by the time we're at the summit. But the next time we all see each other will be at the networking event and then and on to a good summit the next day. So hope you all have a good time in the meantime and look forward to seeing you all then.
Ned, if you got a minute after, give me a call.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.